I'm Jessica Carter, 29, the daughter they never applauded, the sister mocked into silence. And tonight, I stopped being their quiet shame. In my family, Daniel shines by default, Olivia sparkles on cue. My father toasts them. My aunts adore them. Me? I've always been the afterthought background noise they'd rather erase. But the night Olivia lifted her crystal glass and mocked the dress I stitched with my own hands, I felt something shift. Not a collapse. A spark. Ever been humiliated in the one place that should have sheltered you? Hit like if you've ever been dismissed by your own blood. Comment if someone else's spotlight kept you in the shadows. It all began that evening, under chandeliers that glittered like judgment, as I stepped into the ballroom and felt every eye turn toward me. The ballroom was alive with light, strings of violins cutting through the murmur of relatives greeting one another, yet her gaze pierced me sharper than any bow across strings. I thought of my mother's voice, faded but still stubborn in my memory. One day, let them see you as you are. The words clung to me like a shield, though even a shield can feel unbearably heavy. I walked further into the room, my heels clicking against the polished marble. My dress was not designer. It was mine, stitched in the late hours, crafted from fabric I had hunted down during clearance sales, minimalist lines that felt truer to me than any overpriced label. I had imagined, foolishly perhaps, that the effort would show dignity. But in a room of sequins and silk, dignity was invisible. Olivia's laugh sliced through the clamor. She stood by a cluster of cousins, her gown dripping in crystals like a walking chandelier. "Did you mistake this for a thrift store gala?" she asked, not lowering her voice in the slightest. The words hung in the air, cruelly polished, designed to sting. Cousins tittered. One uncle coughed as if covering a chuckle. Even Richard, my father, shifted in his chair with the faintest sigh, eyes sliding away as though embarrassment itself was contagious. Daniel, radiant in his tuxedo, barely noticed his hand entwined with Sarah's, the golden couple too busy greeting their guests. Heat crawled up my neck. My palms itched, not from shame but from the urge to shout. Yet I held still. I would not give Olivia the satisfaction of watching me break. I folded my hands neatly in front of me, spine straight, pretending I had not heard. Pretending was survival here, but the ballroom was merciless. Olivia's mockery had struck its note, and now whispers scattered through the tables like sparks across dry leaves. She couldn't afford more? Didn't Richard give her something to wear? Always the odd one out. Each hushed remark was louder to me than the string quartet swelling in the corner. The light from the tall windows warmed my shoulders, but I felt cold, a stranger in my own family's circle. I lifted my eyes to the chandelier above crystal upon crystal, radiant and unattainable, and forced a slow breath. Beneath the sparkle, I caught Olivia watching, triumphant in her little cruelty. Still, somewhere beneath my humiliation, I remembered my mother's words again. Let them see you as you are. Perhaps she had not meant this moment, not meant my seams and stitches mocked under golden light. But perhaps one day this dress would not be a mark of shame but a mark of something else. Olivia's laughter rose again, sharper, carrying across the parquet floor. It rolled over me until I felt the eyes of half the ballroom pressing down, until every detail of my cheap outfit was under the brightest spotlight of all. Scorn. And then, before the sting could sink deeper, the microphone cracked with feedback. The MC, all smiles, raised his hand for silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue with introductions," he said, "please join me in welcoming a very special guest who has just arrived at the reception." The clinking of champagne glasses could not drown out the echoes of old betrayals. Each laugh that rose around the dinner tables was a veil, thin and fragile, over years of bruises that hadn't faded. The ballroom had shifted from ceremony to feast, candles flickering along mirrored walls, the air heavy with perfume and the constant shuffle of waiters. Yet every glance, every careless comment, carried the same undertone. Olivia had won the role of star once again. As I eased into my chair, my thoughts slipped backward, uninvited. College. I had been hunched over my desk in that cramped dormitory, sketching silhouettes with stubborn care lines that danced with possibility. Olivia had barged in, eyes scanning the papers scattered across my bed. Days later, she had presented those sketches to her friends as her own. I had walked into the studio to find her basking in applause, the pencil smudges still staining her fingertips, as if she had drawn them herself. I had said nothing then, and the silence had rotted inside me ever since. Now, in the glow of the wedding banquet, her voice was just as bright, just as shameless. "My contract will be finalized next week," Olivia announced, lifting her champagne flute with the grace of someone utterly convinced of her worth. Modeling for a European house? The campaign will be everywhere: billboards, magazines. It's only the beginning. A cousin leaned forward, wide-eyed. That's incredible, Olivia. You've always had such an eye for fashion. Another guest, an old family friend, reached across to squeeze her hand. And such talent for design. I remember those sketches you showed us. You really were born for this world. The compliment landed like a slap. My fork trembled, a soft clatter against porcelain. I felt the sting of years compressed into one moment, the injustice hidden under their praise. My sketches, my dreams. And here they were, cemented into her legend while I sat in silence, an invisible architect of her triumphs. Richard shifted uncomfortably at the head of the table. He coughed, perhaps sensing the tension, but made no move to correct the narrative. His gaze slid away, and I knew the truth. In his eyes, success mattered more than fairness. Across the table, Olivia's smirk curved. She had caught the flicker of pain in my expression and savored it like a fine wine. The candlelight made her diamonds glitter, but her eyes carried a sharper brilliance, triumph laced with fear, as though crushing me was her only assurance of superiority. She's always been the ambitious one, an aunt murmured, tilting her glass toward Olivia. Then, with a sympathetic glance in my direction, she added, Jessica never really found her place, did she? The words slipped through me like a cold blade. My place, as though my existence was defined only by absence of acclaim, of recognition, of worth. I tried to lift my chin, to let the glow of the candles hide the fracture in my composure. Olivia seized the silence. She leaned closer, her voice carrying just enough to reach me and the nearby table. You'll never understand success, Jess. It's not for dreamers. Laughter bubbled at the edges of the conversation, half nervous, half complicit. My breath faltered, my chest tightening until I thought I might suffocate on the scent of roses and roasted lamb. But I smiled faintly, the kind of smile forged in the fire of humiliation, and set my napkin neatly on the table. I need some air, I whispered, rising before anyone could protest. The doors to the balcony opened with a creak, letting in the cool breath of November. The chatter dimmed behind me, replaced by the hush of the city below. I inhaled deeply, savoring the distance from the room's poisoned laughter. And then I noticed him, a tall figure leaning against the stone balustrade, the tip of his cigar glowing faintly in the dark. Smoke curled into the night as his eyes turned toward me, watchful, appraising, as though he had been waiting all along. Through the haze of cigar smoke, a pair of sharp eyes studied me like an unfinished sketch. The night air was brisk, carrying with it the scents of the city car exhaust, roasted chestnuts from a street vendor far below, the faint trace of rain clinging to pavement. The balcony jutted over Manhattan like a stage, its marble balustrade cool beneath my fingers. Inside, laughter and music swelled, but out here, time seemed suspended. Only the glow of his cigar punctured the darkness, a steady ember that burned with patient confidence. My phone vibrated against my palm. I slipped it quickly to my ear, turning slightly away. Sophia's voice, quiet but edged with determination, filtered through the static. The files are ready whenever you give the signal. I inhaled sharply, glancing over my shoulder to ensure the cigar smoke still shrouded us in anonymity. Not tonight, I whispered. I'm not ready. My words quivered, though I forced them into the steady rhythm of control. But the truth lingered beneath. The moment was coming closer, pressing against me from every angle. I ended the call, sliding the phone back into the clutch clasped against my side. When I looked up again, he had stepped forward. The smoke curled around his features, revealing sharp cheekbones, the faintest silver at his temples, and eyes that gleamed like glass under candlelight. Still hiding in plain sight, Jessica? His voice was low, deliberate, each syllable laced with recognition. My breath stalled. He spoke my name as though it were a signature he had memorized long ago, as though my attempts to disappear beneath my family's disdain had been futile. The designer whose name carried weight in every magazine, whose shows dictated the seasons, now stood before me not as a stranger, but as someone who already knew. I forced a brittle smile. You must be mistaken. I'm just here for my brother's wedding. Alexander tilted his head, cigar balanced between two fingers. Is that the story you tell them? That you're no one? Interesting, considering I've seen your work. The lines so precise, so fearless, they haunt a man once he's glimpsed them. Heat crawled up my neck. The sketches, The hidden portfolio I had sent under another name, believing the anonymity would protect me. Had he connected the dots? Or was this another cruel twist of fate? Another way for Olivia to eclipse me even here? I stepped back, heels scraping lightly against the stone. You shouldn't. Relax. His smile curved, not unkind, but weighted. Your secret is safe. For now. But don't think you can keep brilliance locked in the shadows forever. Fashion consumes truth, Jessica. It devours lies. His words struck deeper than Olivia's mockery ever could. Olivia's cruelty was blunt, childish in its hunger for attention. But this was a mirror held before me, reflecting what I had fought to bury. I wasn't invisible. I was hiding. Inside the ballroom, the band struck up a new melody. Applause rippled faintly through the doors. But on this balcony, it was just the two of us, his certainty pressing against my denial, smoke spiraling like fate's cruel handwriting across the air. Why tell me this? My voice came out thin, defensive. Because, he said, leaning closer, the scent of tobacco and expensive cologne enveloping me. When the world finally sees you, they'll have no choice but to forget her. His gaze sharpened. And something tells me you're already preparing for that day. My clutch buzzed again, Sophia's second call. I ignored it, unwilling to break the fragile spell between truth and exposure. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, to confess, but the words crumbled. He had already said enough. And then the door burst open. Heels clattered against the marble floor, the swish of silk dragging sharp across the night air. Olivia stormed onto the balcony, her eyes narrowing, lips curled into a smile that was all venom. Her gaze darted from me to Alexander Moretti, recognition sparking like flint. The music faltered as Olivia yanked me forward, my dress raised for the crowd to laugh at. The ballroom, so carefully choreographed with violins and silver trays, lurched into chaos at her tug. My heels scraped across the polished marble, the light of the chandeliers cascading over me like interrogation lamps. Every note of the quartet stumbled, faltered, and died. Suddenly, every pair of eyes turned not toward the bride, not toward the groom, but toward me. Caught in the center of a spectacle I had not chosen, my mother's voice flickered in memory, as if carried on the hush that followed. Simplicity, if true, outshines diamonds. She had always believed in quiet elegance, in dignity over display. But now, her wisdom felt like a cruel whisper drowned beneath the swell of laughter. Olivia's voice cut through the air. Ladies and gentlemen, can we just admire this creation? She tugged at the hem of my handmade dress, lifting it just enough to expose its raw seams to the harsh light. Did you mistake this for a clearance rack charity? Ripples of amusement spread like a contagion. Relatives leaned closer to one another, hands covering mouths to mask smirks. A few guests pulled out their phones, the red lights of recording already blinking. A chorus of chuckles swelled, growing into open laughter that bounced off the marble columns. I tried to steady my breath, but each sound was a blade. I could feel the fabric of my work, the fabric of myself tearing under the weight of their ridicule. Daniel, the groom, shifted uneasily near the head table, his face tightening as though he wanted to intervene but lacked the courage to spoil his own celebration. Sarah, radiant in her lace gown, turned away, unwilling to stain her wedding with family shame. And then, Richard, my father! His jaw was clenched, his gaze fixed anywhere but me. He did not speak. He did not defend me. The silence of his disapproval was louder than Olivia's cruelty. In that instant, I understood. I had been disowned long before this humiliation, orphaned not by death, but by neglect. Olivia reveled in the silence, her laughter brighter than the chandeliers. She spun toward the crowd with a theatrical sweep of her arm. You see? Always the odd one, never fitting in. My poor sister thinks she can pass this off as fashion. Her words stung more deeply because they were barbed with truth. I had poured myself into this dress, every stitch a refusal to conform, every line a statement of defiance. But in this room filled with glittering gowns and tailored suits, it was no more than a canvas for ridicule. The laughter swelled, feeding her cruelty. My throat tightened. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, to tell them that simplicity was its own form of power, but the words drowned before they reached my tongue. My silence became their proof. The humiliation was complete. Phones hovered higher, flashes strobing like paparazzi. My hands trembled as I pulled the fabric back into place, wishing I could vanish into the seams of the floor. And then, like thunder breaking through a storm of mockery, the heavy ballroom doors opened. The MC's voice boomed above the laughter. warm and commanding. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have the honor of welcoming a very special guest tonight, Mr. Alexander Moretti." The ballroom froze as Alexander Moretti walked straight toward me. It was as though the air itself had thickened, the laughter from moments ago caught in the throats of the guests who had mocked me. His presence commanded silence, his stride measured, his gaze sharp, his reputation towering higher than the chandeliers. Every whispered conversation faltered as his polished shoes clicked against the marble, each step a gavel striking judgment. My heart pounded so loudly I feared the whole room could hear it. His words from the balcony echoed in my mind. Still hiding in plain sight? He had seen me then, through the smoke and the city's lights, and now he would see me again. Only this time, so would everyone else. Alexander stopped just inches away. His eyes traveled the length of my handmade dress, not with the contempt I had endured, but with scrutiny laced with something far more dangerous, respect. He lifted a hand, his touch grazing the hem with reverence, then met my gaze. "Exquisite," he said, his voice ringing clearly enough for the entire ballroom to hear. "True quiet luxury." The words detonated like a revelation. The crowd gasped collectively, their shock shattering the silence into fragments of disbelief. The same mouths that had laughed a moment earlier now gaped, their expressions twisting into shame, into envy, into confusion. Phones lowered slowly, as though recording such a reversal would only expose their own pettiness. Olivia's face burned crimson. She tried to laugh it off, her voice shrill and unconvincing. "You must be joking, Mr. Moretti. That thing is barely stitched together." But her bravado wavered under his stare, and the room no longer believed her. The sparkle of cruelty in her eyes dimmed as the weight of authority bore down. Richard's head snapped up. His features stiffened with the realization that the daughter he had tried to ignore was suddenly the centerpiece of admiration. Daniel and Sarah exchanged a glance, uncertain, their perfect wedding backdrop hijacked by a story far larger than themselves. Alexander did not look away. He extended his hand, every movement deliberate, symbolic. The ballroom held its breath. "We'll see each other at Apex's board meeting soon," he said. His fingers closed around mine firmly, not as a gesture of comfort, but of recognition, of partnership of truth. A murmur rippled outward like concentric circles on water. Whispers surged, carried across candlelit tables and crystal flutes. "Apex? Board meeting? What does he mean?" The name repeated itself in confusion and awe, wrapping itself around me like a cloak. Guests leaned into one another, speculation blooming, suspicion igniting. Olivia's lips parted, but no words came. The mockery she had wielded like a blade lay shattered at her feet. And though my pulse still raced, though shame lingered like smoke in the air, for the first time that night, I stood taller, steadier, no longer invisible. The scrape of silverware stopped. Every eye lingered on the space between Moretti and me. A second ago, laughter had bubbled across the banquet tables, champagne pouring freely, cutlery clinking against porcelain in the rhythm of a celebration. But now, stillness. It was as if every guest held their breath, waiting for confirmation of what they thought they'd seen. Alexander Moretti, the most untouchable name in fashion, singling out me, the sister in the cheap dress, for recognition. The echo of Olivia's sneer from earlier, that's thrift store fabric, curled through my mind like smoke, and the bitter irony almost made me laugh. The conversations that had mocked me were now replaced by whispers, sharp and desperate. "She knows him? What did he mean, Apex? Since when?" The questions carried, overlapping in the tense silence of the ballroom. Relatives leaned in closer to each other, the same mouths that had chuckled cruelly now struggling to make sense of the reversal. Their eyes darted back to me, suspicious, prying, as though my dress concealed an entire history they had been blind to. Richard's gaze weighed heavily from across the table. My father had perfected the art of indifference toward me, his attention always drawn to Olivia, his pride invested in her glittering future. But tonight, indifference cracked, his brows pulled low, eyes narrowing, studying me not with dismissal, but with unease. I could see the wheels turning in his mind. Had I underestimated her? What else have I ignored? For a moment he looked not like a father, but like a businessman sizing up a competitor. Olivia tried to regain her grip on the room. She tilted her head back with forced laughter, the sound too shrill, too brittle. "Really, people, it's nothing. My sister, she gets lucky sometimes. You know how coincidences look dramatic when you don't know the context." Her fork clattered against her plate, betraying her nerves even as her lips curved in what she thought was a dismissive smile. The guests weren't convinced. Moretti's reputation was too solid, his admiration too intentional. His glance alone carried weight, and when his eyes lingered on me across the tables, a new current pulsed through the room. Olivia's voice grew sharper, higher pitched, as she gestured toward me. She knows no one important. Trust me. She couldn't possibly. Her words rang louder than intended, bouncing against the chandeliers, pulling all attention back to her. The mask of control slipped from her face. I saw insecurity there, naked and raw, as though the crowd's suspicion wasn't just about me, but about her, about how much of her success had been performance. My father's knife pressed hard against his plate. Daniel shifted in his seat, his new bride Sarah giving a tight smile, as if wishing the night would hurry back to its rehearsed perfection. The wedding had become secondary. The true spectacle was unraveling at their table, the family's veneer cracking in front of hundreds. And then, slowly, deliberately, Alexander Moretti lifted his glass. His movements were unhurried, deliberate, commanding attention, with nothing more than the arc of crystal catching the chandelier light. He raised it toward me, not to Olivia, not to the groom, not even to the couple at the center of this reception. To me. The silence spread like a challenge. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks hovered above plates, abandoned. Olivia's mouth opened, but no sound came. Even my father's steady composure faltered. It was no longer a wedding toast. It was a reckoning, and I was its center. I slipped into the service corridor, away from chandeliers, into the hum of ice machines and whispering plots. The air changed instantly. Gone was the perfumed haze of champagne and roses. Here it smelled of bleach and metal, of work and anonymity. The muffled strains of music from the ballroom pressed through the walls, distorted and faint, like a world I no longer belonged to. My heels clicked against the linoleum, a sound out of place among the quiet bustle of waiters retrieving trays and staff whispering instructions. I exhaled slowly, grateful for the shadows. My phone buzzed, and I pressed it to my ear with a quick glance over my shoulder. Sophia's voice came steady, efficient, almost cold. The files are ready. Olivia's contract cancellation email time, stamped, verified, already forwarded to my secure drive. Her precision soothed me, like a pianist striking the right note in a silent hall. I closed my eyes for a breath, absorbing it. The noose was tightening, not around my neck, but around Olivia's. Yet even in Victory's outline, memories cut deep. I could still see the college studio, sketchbooks lined with the kind of ideas only sleepless nights and stubborn belief could produce. And Olivia smiling, flattering, before vanishing with pages in her bag. I had watched her parade my designs as her own, her laughter echoing as praise fell at her feet. Tonight's humiliation had been nothing more than an extension of that theft of performance, a practiced cruelty. A burst of voices pulled me back. Through a crack in the service door, I caught Olivia's silhouette. She leaned in close to one of her modeling contacts, voice sharp and theatrical. Don't worry about the designer. He's fickle. Today it's her. Tomorrow it will be someone else. She's no one. Her words rolled out like currency, a desperate attempt to buy back influence she could feel slipping. She laughed too loudly, covering insecurity with bravado, and the hollow ring of it carried even into the corridor. I stayed still, breath shallow, letting her condemn herself with every word. Her tone cracked for an instant, and I saw the girl beneath the frightened shadow of someone terrified of being replaced. It almost moved me, until the next line sliced clean through sympathy. You were born to stand outside the ballroom, Jessica, she sneered, voice low, as though the walls themselves needed reminding of my place. That's where you'll always be. The sting was sharp, but it did not sink as it once would have. The service corridor's dim light felt less like exile and more like strategy, the vantage point from which the unseen threads were pulled. Let her sneer. I had files, evidence, truth ready to spill. My phone buzzed again. Sophia's voice came through in a whisper, urgent, electric. Media are already circling. Your trap is set. While fireworks bloomed outside, I caught a darker spark, numbers on a ledger that could burn Daniel alive. The muffled thud of celebratory drums and the crowd's cheers filtered through the walls of the hotel's VIP lounge, but here, behind velvet ropes and heavy curtains, the atmosphere thickened with dread. I lingered in the shadows of the doorway, half hidden by the carved molding, the smell of expensive cigars and spilled whiskey hanging in the air. Daniel's voice, low and raw, vibrated through the room as he pressed his phone tight to his ear. No, you listen to me, I don't care about due dates or penalties. You said the loans were structured. 20 million doesn't just evaporate overnight. His forehead glistened, sweat trickling along his temples despite the lounge's chilled air. His hand trembled, though he masked it by pacing, each step leaving a nervous echo across the plush carpet. Sarah sat on the leather sofa, her hands clenched in her lap, knuckles white as ivory. Her eyes darted between her husband and the silent walls, desperate for reassurance that wouldn't come. "Daniel," she whispered urgently, "keep your voice down. Not tonight. Please. If anyone hears—" Her words cracked, fear sharpening her tone. She pressed a trembling hand against her chest as if willing her heart to slow. I shifted further inside, footsteps light. Neither of them noticed me at first. My brother was too consumed by the unraveling of his mask. His perfect groom's smile stripped bare by numbers and debt. The phone conversation dragged, filled with clipped threats from the other end. And then finally he slammed it onto the marble bar counter with a shuddering curse. "This wedding was supposed to seal everything," he hissed. Not at Sarah, not even at himself, but into the air as though fate had betrayed him. His tie hung loose, his collar open, revealing the strain of the day. Sarah rose quickly, placing her hands on his shoulders. "We'll fix it. We always do. Just hide it for now. Tonight has to look perfect. Please, Daniel." I watched her desperation, her loyalty bleeding into fear. She clung to him like someone already drowning. He sighed, the arrogance returning in fragments. "If worst comes to worst," he muttered, his voice bitter, "I'll borrow from Jessica. She's too naive to refuse. She always has been." The words landed like cold steel. My jaw tightened, but I didn't step forward. Instead, I let the moment coil into silence, watching him speak with the certainty of someone who had never once considered me capable of saying no. His voice carried the entitlement of a man who believed his family's sacrifices and secrets would always bend in his favor. I let the pause stretch. Then, soft enough that only the room itself seemed to hear, I whispered, "Are you sure?" The sound startled Sarah, who turned sharply toward me, eyes widening, but Daniel remained oblivious, too wrapped in his frustration. I pulled the door shut with deliberate calm, the faint click cutting them off from the world outside. His hand shook as he clutched his glass, but his words cut like orders. "Don't shame this family further." The ballroom swirled just a few paces away, violins climbing, heels tapping, laughter bubbling under the chandeliers. But here, in the dim bar corner, my father's voice carried more weight than the orchestra. The ice in his glass clinked against crystal, trembling with every small tremor in his hand. He tried to disguise it with a sip of scotch, but the bitterness in his tone betrayed him. "You never think about the name you carry, Jessica." His eyes, bloodshot and tired, pinned me with the old authority I remembered from childhood. "Do you enjoy being a spectacle? First that ridiculous dress, now Alexander Moretti pretending you matter. You're turning whispers into daggers aimed at us." I said nothing at first. The golden reflection of the bar lights danced along the rim of my glass of water, and I let him rage against the silence. He needed me to flinch, to break, but I would not. "Olivia and Daniel are the Carters' future," he continued, voice dropping into a rasp. "They shine where you stumble. They belong in this world. You—" His lips twisted, as though even the thought soured his mouth. "You do not." The words sank like stones, heavy, familiar, and yet, beneath them, my mother's voice still lived. Grace, hunched by candlelight with needle and thread, whispering as she sewed, "Simplicity, if true, outshines diamonds." Her hands had bled for the gowns she stitched, every cut of fabric a prayer for dignity. She had been the one to believe in me, when Richard only saw weakness. I felt the ache of her absence sharpen, but I did not let it spill. My father set his glass down with a hard thud, leaning closer, his shadow crossing mine. "Admit you are nothing," he said, the words guttural final. "Do that, and I'll have Olivia take care of you. She can keep you from starving. You'll be a quiet charity in her shadow. That's all you're suited for." For a moment my breath caught. He had no idea how deep the wound of his dismissal went, how many years of striving it had fueled. His offer wasn't mercy, it was a cage, gilded by pride. I lifted my eyes to his, steady and unblinking. My voice came low, steady as steel. "You're wrong. I don't need saving." And I let the silence stretch, my gaze hardening, until he looked away first. The microphone hummed. For the first time, I didn't shrink from the spotlight. The stage lights pooled in a pale glow across the ballroom, brighter than the chandeliers, brighter than the jewel tones gleaming from gowns and cufflinks below. I felt hundreds of eyes turning toward me as the master of ceremonies announced my name, his cheerful cadence oblivious to the stakes this moment carried. A few guests shifted in their seats, curious, others already smirking at the idea of me addressing such an audience. Olivia's laughter reached me even before I stepped forward. She leaned toward a cousin at her table, hand half covering her lips, whispering something that set their shoulders shaking. Daniel slouched with his arm around Sarah, a forced grin plastered across his tired face. My father swirled his drink, refusing to look at me, as if he already knew I would shame him again. But when my hand touched the microphone, the hum steadied me. Moretti's eyes found mine from across the room, calm, unreadable, but the faintest of nods flickered like a secret signal. His balcony words echoed in my mind. Still hiding in plain sight? Not anymore. I know, I began, voice carrying sharper than I expected, that many of you were surprised when I walked into this ballroom today. My eyes scanned the crowd, sequins, diamonds, tuxedos, all glitter and polish, but I saw the undercurrent of whispers, the quiet glee at my earlier humiliation. It's easy to laugh at what doesn't match, what doesn't shine quite as loudly. Olivia tilted her chin higher, her smile widening as though she tasted victory in every word. She thought I would crumple here, in front of them all. I let the silence swell for a beat. Then I continued. Our family has always valued appearances. What we wear, what we drive, what we can show the world. But what happens when the surface is spotless while the inside rots? Do the jewels still matter then? A murmur rippled through the guests, a few exchanging uneasy glances. I drew a breath, steady, and pushed forward. We measure ourselves by shine, but shine fades. Truth doesn't. My mother taught me that when she stitched beauty from scraps, never caring if anyone else approved. She told me that dignity comes not from what others hand you, but from what you create with your own hands. The air shifted. Chairs creaked as guests leaned forward listening. Olivia's smile slipped, ever so slightly. Daniel glanced away, muttering to Sarah, who clutched her glass tighter. My father stiffened, jaw clenching hard enough to whiten his cheeks. I felt the warmth of Grace's memory rise inside me, stitching courage into every word. I let the final line land heavy. Outward shine means nothing if it hides rot inside. Silence followed, absolute, suffocating, the kind that presses against the skin. Forks rested midair, glasses hovered, no one daring to break the spell. And then, from the far side of the ballroom, Moretti stood. His hands came together slowly, firmly, echoing across the hall. The first clap cracked the silence like glass. Another joined, then another, until applause spread in stunned waves, filling every corner of the glittering room. Her lipstick smudged as she stared at the glowing phone screen. The contract was gone. The hallway outside the ballroom was a world apart from the glittering chaos within. Music pulsed faintly through the closed doors, muted laughter riding on the bass of the speakers, but here the air was hushed and heavy. The sconces along the walls threw dim amber pools across the patterned carpet, shadows stretching long enough to feel like ghosts. Olivia stood frozen in one of those pools of light, her manicured fingers trembling as she scrolled, reread, scrolled again. Her breath caught in ragged pulls that fogged the glossy screen. Her friends lingered a few paces back, all sequins and anxious perfume, their chatter thinning to whispers that prickled like needles. One of them glanced at the phone and gasped, a hand rising instinctively to her mouth. The others leaned closer, curiosity outweighing loyalty. Their eyes darted from the screen to Olivia's face, watching cracks form in the carefully lacquered facade. On the glowing display, the words were unmistakable. Contract terminated. Effective immediately. The logo of the agency sat like a cruel stamp of finality. Attached, a note citing breach of integrity and misrepresentation. Olivia's lips parted soundlessly. A streak of lipstick smeared at the corner where she had bitten down. They can't, she whispered hoarsely, shaking her head, curls falling loose from their careful frame. They can't do this to me. Not tonight. But the whispers behind her sharpened. One friend murmured, "Her reputation, didn't they say she forged sketches?" Another replied in a tone too low to be kindness, "I heard she stole designs. No agency forgives that." The circle around her widened as if shame were contagious. I watched from the corner, leaning casually against the wall. My phone buzzed once in my palm, a message from Sophia lighting up the screen. The trap is set. The words pulsed with a satisfaction I didn't allow to reach my expression. Olivia turned abruptly, eyes locking on me, wild and desperate. You, she hissed, heels clacking as she closed the distance. Her friends melted away, leaving her exposed, a queen stripped of her court. You did this, didn't you? I let the silence stretch, only the muffled thump of music filling it. Her breath came sharp, shallow, like a predator cornered by her prey instead. First, you embarrass me in front of everyone. Then you cozy up to Moretti. And now this? You ruined everything. Her words spat flecks of venom, but her hands trembled too violently to point steady blame. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her, anger barely covering the fear seeping through her cracked glamour. Not everything was yours to steal, Olivia. My voice was calm, almost soft, but it landed like stone. I didn't need to raise it. The truth itself had weight enough. She flinched, eyes darting back to her phone as if she might will the message to vanish. But it glowed mercilessly, her career dissolving in real time. The smear of her lipstick looked more like war paint running in defeat. My own phone buzzed again. Another message from Sophia blinked across the screen. Daniel's time is next. And for the first time all evening, the cold satisfaction in my chest began to burn with the heat of what was still to come. The groom's smile cracked as the words "federal investigation" hissed from the phone. Daniel's voice faltered mid-laugh, the easy charm that had carried him all night collapsing in an instant. The VIP suite felt suddenly smaller, its velvet curtains and gold-trimmed chairs suffocating under the weight of that phrase. He gripped the phone tighter, knuckles paling as his lawyer's voice droned on the other end, rapid-fire legal jargon spilling into panic. Sarah hovered near the minibar, twisting a cocktail napkin until it shredded, her eyes wide with a dread she couldn't disguise. The bank? What do you mean the bank's accounts are frozen? Daniel's tone pitched upward, anger barely concealing the fear lacing his words. No, you listen to me. You fix this. I don't care what strings you have to pull. Do you hear me? Fix it. His shoulders hunched as though the very air pressed down on him. The sweat shining on his brow betrayed the tailored perfection of his tuxedo. Sarah rushed forward, clutching at his arm. Daniel, please, keep your voice down, she pleaded. Her mascara already streaking from tears she hadn't even tried to wipe away. If anyone hears, if anyone suspects, they already do, Daniel snapped, shoving her hand off. He raked his fingers through his hair, the perfect groom unraveling thread by thread. Federal investigation. Do you know what that means? It means vultures, headlines, ruin. And on our wedding night. I stood near the door, a quiet shadow at the edge of their unraveling, watching the chaos unfold with a calm Daniel mistook for indifference. He hadn't yet realized calm could be sharper than rage. Sarah collapsed onto the couch, her sobs muffled by her shaking hands. What will we do? The reporters will eat us alive. The family, your father, my parents. Daniel spun on me, eyes bloodshot, his voice venomous. This is you. This is your doing, Jessica. His words spat like a cornered animal. You've been plotting, whispering with Moretti, slinking around like some silent viper. Admit it. You fed them. You ruined me. I held his gaze, the storm of his accusations breaking uselessly against me. I didn't move closer, didn't raise my voice, only let the truth sit steady between us. I don't need to destroy you, Daniel. You've already done it yourself. The line landed with the precision of a blade, clean and undeniable, his face drained of color, the reality he had tried so hard to outrun catching up with him all at once. His breath stuttered, as if the walls themselves whispered his collapse back to him. Sarah's sobs swelled into wails. She buried her face in her trembling hands, repeating, "It's over, it's over," as though the words might reverse themselves if said enough times. Daniel staggered toward the suite window, one hand braced against the glass, as if he could push the weight of his ruin onto the city below. But outside, the night had already turned hostile. From the street below, a sudden burst of white light flared, then another. The distinct staccato of camera shutters rose like insects buzzing. Reporters had gathered at the hotel entrance, their lenses glinting with hunger. Each flash illuminated Daniel's reflection on the glass, his smile gone, his empire fractured, his downfall captured before he could even deny it. In the chapel's silence, I heard my mother's voice stitched into every seam of my dress. The small hotel chapel sat apart from the thrum of the ballroom, its stained glass windows casting muted colors over the empty pews. The air smelled faintly of wax and roses, a pocket of calm that felt almost unreal after the laughter, the scandals, the gasps that had cracked open the wedding like glass under pressure. I sat in the front row, fingertips tracing the fabric of my dress, every thread reminding me of Grace Carter, the woman who had sewn not only gowns but dignity out of scraps. I remembered how she used to come home late from waitressing, fingers blistered from balancing trays, yet always bringing a few crumpled bills to slide into my sketchbook. "It's not much, Jess," she would whisper, "but dreams need feeding." Those dollars became fabric swatches, secondhand textbooks, entry fees she never told Richard about. She had believed in me before I had learned to believe in myself, but Richard never saw it that way. To him, every coin was wasted if it wasn't poured into Daniel's schooling or Olivia's charm. He mocked Grace for indulging childish sketches. He mocked me for daring to want more than a shadowy corner in my siblings' glow. Tonight, as the echoes of betrayal clattered through my head, I could almost hear her telling me, "Stand, don't let them shrink you." The heavy door creaked. Richard's tall figure loomed, his steps deliberate, as though he feared even the chapel might accuse him. He didn't bow his head, didn't glance at the altar, only at me, like I was one more loose thread he needed to cut clean. "You will say nothing further tonight," he hissed, voice low but sharp enough to slice the quiet. His hand clamped the back of the pew, veins pulsing. "Not to the press, not to Moretti, not to anyone. Do you understand? The Carters may be wounded, but we will not be humiliated. You'll hold your tongue for the honor of this family." I rose slowly, letting the silence stretch until his jaw clenched. My eyes found his, the man who had turned away every time Grace begged him to look closer, to see me. "Family honor," I said softly. "Mother's money kept your business afloat when you gambled it away. Her savings, her double shifts, her health. She carried you, and you let her break." His face darkened, shame flashing for the briefest instant before pride smothered it. "Your mother's choices were foolish. She should have listened to me. And now you will too, Jessica. This is no time for melodrama." I pressed my palm against my dress, feeling the invisible stitches of sacrifice. My throat tightened, but my words came steady. "Mother saw me when you refused. Tonight, the world will too." Richard flinched, but before he could summon another command, the muffled chapel air split with noise. A roar from beyond the walls, shouts, hurried footsteps, the shrill bark of questions carried down hallways. Reporters had breached the ballroom, their voices rising like a tidal wave, flooding the sanctuary of pretense. The chaos had found us. Cameras flashed like lightning. The wedding had become a battlefield. The ballroom, once a stage for luxury and spectacle, had turned into a storm of bodies, microphones, and relentless questions. Photographers pressed against overturned chairs, their shutters cracked like thunderclaps, blinding in their repetition. Guests scattered toward the exits in glittering panic, heels clattering against marble, laughter from earlier in the night smothered beneath the roar of scandal breaking loose. Sophia's voice rang faint in memory. "The press will be ready." She had not exaggerated. The reporters had arrived in force, and their questions were arrows aimed precisely at the Carters. "Mr. Carter, is it true the federal investigation involves your son-in-law's bank dealings?" one shouted over the chaos. Another sharper, "How deep are the questionable loans, Daniel?" Daniel's face, once composed in that groom's smile, collapsed into raw fear. Sweat plastered his forehead as he raised his hands, trying to block the microphones that crowded him. This is nonsense," he stammered. His voice cracked, each denial weaker than the last. Sarah clung to his arm, mascara streaking down her face, whispering his name like a lifeline he could not hold. Olivia fared no better. A reporter shoved a phone screen toward her, the headline glowing, "Top agency terminates Olivia Carter contract." Murmurs swelled as cameras caught the smear of her ruined lipstick, the trembling hand she tried to disguise as poise. "What about the plagiarism allegations, Olivia? Did you really build your career on stolen sketches?" She laughed too loudly, the brittle kind that cut her throat, but the sound only fueled the feeding frenzy. Friends she had paraded hours earlier slipped out of sight, unwilling to be caught in the collapse. Her smile dissolved, leaving nothing but the raw edges of panic. Richard stood at the center like a captain abandoning command, barking at the air. "Enough! This is a private celebration! You have no right!" His voice drowned beneath the tide. The patriarch who once believed control could be wielded like a weapon now, found himself stripped, powerless against the surge of questions and lights. His hand trembled as he tried to hold his glass aloft, but the crystal slipped, shattering across the ballroom floor. And I, Jessica, stood still amid the storm. My family fractured in real time, their masks stripped beneath the blaze of cameras. My dress caught the glimmer of flashes, not as mockery this time, but as armor. The one man who did not falter was Moretti. Without words, he stepped beside me, his presence a silent shield. His gaze fixed ahead, his chin tilted slightly as if to say, "They will not devour you." His subtle solidarity was louder than the chaos. The questions shifted. They turned like wolves scenting fresh prey, their microphones pivoting toward me. "You," a woman's voice called, sharp and clear. "Jessica Carter, is it true you have ties to Apex Fashion Group?" The ballroom fell into a hush that was almost violent. Even the reporters paused, waiting. Olivia froze, eyes wide, lips parted. Daniel swallowed hard. Richard's hand fell to his side, limp as though the question had stolen the last defense from his body. All those faces turned toward me, the crowd, the cameras, my family crumbling behind me. And I, remembering Grace's sacrifice stitched into every seam, remembering Sophia's whispered promise, remembering Moretti's balcony warning, let the silence expand until it felt like the world held its breath. I met the lens of the closest camera, steady, unwavering. A faint smile curved my lips, deliberate, unreadable. I said nothing, but in the hush, that silence spoke louder than any confession. The microphone was cold in my hand, but my voice burned with years of silence breaking. The ballroom was no longer a sanctuary of chandeliers and champagne. It had become a tribunal. Midnight struck on the grand clock above the entrance, each chime punctuating the hush that settled over the hall. Cameras hovered like vultures, red recording lights glowing in the dark. Faces turned upward, waiting. Some hostile, some curious, some too stunned to blink. I gripped the microphone tighter, letting its weight anchor me. For years I had been the shadow at the edge of family photographs, the subject of ridicule at dinners, the silent one in the corner. But now, with the world watching, silence no longer served me. My mother's voice guided me still. "One day, let them see you as you are." Behind me, the projection screen lit up, Sophia's careful preparation clicking into place. The first slide appeared clean, stark. Apex Fashion Group. Its portfolio unfurled across the screen like a banner. Labels worth billions, subsidiaries spanning continents, the revenues that kept entire industries afloat. Gasps rippled through the room as names recognizable even to the most indifferent guest glowed in white against black. I let them murmur. Then the slides shifted again. Olivia's face appeared next to sketches she had paraded as her own. The time-stamped originals bore my name, my initials, my mother's handwriting in the margins. The truth lit up bigger than life, undeniable. Olivia staggered back, her glass tilting until the liquid spilled onto her gown. Whispers pierced her composure. Plagiarist. Fraud. Daniel's downfall followed, not with whispers but with numbers. His debts loans stacked upon lies glared in stark print. The figure $20 million glowed under the spotlight, linked to his name. His phone buzzed relentlessly in his hand, the lawyer's warnings echoing even before I spoke a word. "A man who promised to provide," I said, my voice steady, "but built his house on rot." Sarah sobbed beside him, mascara bleeding into the lace of her sleeves, and Richard the patriarch appeared last. Not his face, but the paper trail. Accounts bled dry. Grace's savings funneled into ventures that collapsed under his pride. His signature marked the ruin, his denial etched into the ink. His hand, once strong enough to command a family, now trembled as he reached for the back of a chair to steady himself. The room fell into silence heavier than any jeer I had ever endured. It was the silence of recognition, of revelation. For so long, they had laughed at me. Tonight, the laughter had turned into a gasp. I raised my head, my voice ringing clear. "I am Jessica Carter, the woman you dismissed, the empire you mocked, and tonight you see me." The words reverberated, sharp, unshakable. Gasps exploded through the hall. Olivia sank into her chair, face pale, her hands trembling too hard to lift a glass. Richard froze where he stood, the weight of denial crashing down at last. Daniel's phone slipped from his hand, clattering against the marble with a sound that echoed louder than applause. And still, I stood, seen at last. Beneath the glittering ruin of that wedding night, truth finally stood taller than vanity. and the proud were unmasked by their own deceit. Betrayal that once silenced a daughter became the stage for her voice, proving that injustice may linger, but it can never reign forever. When injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict can echo through a lifetime. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. If you felt the sting and the triumph in this story, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. Type 1 if you resonate. Type 2 if you feel something is still missing.